If there's a topic that gets wedding vendors of all types talking, it's vendor meals. Our clients will never hear about these things, but we all tell stories about them amongst ourselves. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what we're fed at weddings. Sometimes it's prime rib time, and sometimes it's peanut butter jelly time. Pretty much every photographer or videographer or a DJ I've run into has stories to tell about the meals they've been served or not served at one wedding or another. I've been fortunate that, by and large, I've worked at venues that understand the importance of serving us at the right time and are also on board with feeding us something with actual nutrition, not just caloric value. I've had a couple of experiences, though, that are part of my own personal history of how I've been treated at weddings. There are some venues in my area, not coincidentally among my favorite places to work, who get it. I understand why a venue might want to serve all the guests before the vendors, I really do. I think photographers and videographers would pretty universally prefer to have their meals the same time as the couple. That way, when they're done eating, it's more or less the same time we're done, and we can get back to work doing what we were hired to do without missing anything. Otherwise, if we'd been saved to the end, by the time our food hits the table, it might suddenly be time to cut the cake or do parent dances. That not only makes for grumpy vendors, it shortchanges the couple. I want to be ready to go and do my thing for them, but if it's been 6 hours since I've eaten anything, passing out due to low blood sugar isn't optimal. That's hyperbole, of course, but some people do have these kinds of issues. If someone is a diabetic or otherwise needs to keep their metabolism going, it's not just a matter of being hungry for an hour or two. I've known those photographers and videographers, and they bring snacks to make sure they're good to go. I know at those venues that feed us later, or if I know I'm going to have a longer day, I'll bring something I can snack on to tide me over too. But there's little substitute for taking a 15 or 20-minute sit down to eat a hot meal when you've been on your feet for 7 to 9 hours straight. While certainly the reason I'm at these venues is not for the meal, it definitely helps when the venue feeds us the same meal as the guests. I'm not privy to food costs, but I can't imagine the savings is that substantial when there's a 150-person wedding and the venue offers vendor meals that are sometimes just a sandwich and chips. This is the quintessential and legendary bandwich I've heard stories of my whole career, largely from vendors, especially bands, who were around back in the day. This practice continues at some venues, particularly, and surprisingly to me, higher-end ones. 2 examples stand out in my memory, both from what one might consider high-end venues. I won't name names, but if you know, you know. There was one venue who sat us on a completely different floor from the reception, so we couldn't hear what was going on if something impromptu were to happen. The coordinator had told us to head to that room and our meals would be brought in shortly. On a wedding day, we're always running up against time constraints, so sitting there waiting that far away from the couple and their family made me nervous enough, but it quickly seemed like the venue had forgotten about us. I was able to catch the eye of a server who was heading back to the kitchen from the reception, and they told us we were up next. When you're as physically active on a wedding day as this job demands, you kind of need fuel to keep you going. When this venue that was undoubtedly very expensive delivered us a bowl of pasta and another of bread, well, a table full of carbs was not what the body needs. We shrugged our shoulders and dug in because that was our only option, but yeah, we were all a little sluggish afterward. Another venue also sat us very far away from the party in an unused part of their kitchen and told us to help ourselves to whatever was left. As a grown-up attuned to my inner kid, chicken strips and french fries are certainly tasty, but cold fried, now greasy kids' food also isn't the best thing to keep you going on a physically active and hot day. This is also a good segue to talk about where venues seat us. In that example, we were eating our cold leftovers well out of earshot of the reception. Not 5 minutes after we were brought to that room, the coordinator casually came in to tell us they had started the parent dances. Not that they were about to start, that they had. So we all wiped our greasy fingers off as best we could before grabbing our gear and running down the hall before we missed everything. I wish I could say that was the only time that happened, but there was another local venue that put us in a room just next door to the reception, but we similarly couldn't hear anything. We were halfway through our meals and were checking the itinerary to see what was next, when the coordinator ran in and frantically told us that the DJ had started the father-daughter dance. While this time we didn't have to run down a hallway, it still took us a beat to enter the room without everyone turning to look, get into position to photograph the dance, and thanking ourselves that we had left our off-camera lighting on. I admit, I shot the DJ a dirty look because, come on man, how about a heads up? Professional that he was, he picked up the mic while the father-daughter dance was going on, mind you, and said, "Oh, sorry." It's not like the guy didn't have an assistant he could have sent to let us know. He was just incapable of reading a room. I also understand why a venue wouldn't want to seat those who are working alongside the guests. It's probably a perceived class thing, especially at the fancy venues or those with self-important coordinators, that the people with money don't associate with the help. I think that's outdated and condescending, but it is what it is. I understand we're not guests, and I have no feelings of entitlement that we're owed anything. I just don't think it's too much to ask to be treated like a person and not like something that's there only to get in their way and keep them from doing their job. To that point, and I've only encountered this once, but I know photographers who have a similar story. I was told during one reception when I went to the bar for water that water was for guests only. I mean, who thinks that way? I asked the bartender what he expected us to do, and he told me to take a cup into the bathroom and get water from the sink. It's been a couple of years since this one, but I'm pretty sure I out loud said, "Are you kidding me?" I don't know if he was just following orders or was flush with the power to deny another person water or if he just wanted to place himself higher up in the hierarchy of people who work at weddings. But I must have given him some kind of look because he begrudgingly handed me a tiny glass of water. When I was relaying the story to my second, the DJ was there and chimed in that, yeah, this venue does that. When we're seated in the same room as everyone else, or even right outside the room, it's in everyone's interest. If there's a terrace off the ballroom or a high top we can stand at that's within earshot of the reception, if a DJ starts something without telling us or an impromptu unannounced toast happens, we'll be able to know and rush in to cover it. Wherever the vendor table happens to be, I just want to make sure we're able to do our job and put our best foot forward for the couple. At some weddings, the couple or the venue will tell me to just grab an open seat wherever there happens to be one. I don't mind that at all. Typically, there's a couple of guests who are no-shows, so there's almost always an open seat somewhere. When I do sit with guests, it's almost always a good experience. I get a nice greeting from everyone and usually meet nice people. Sometimes you get treated like a mini celebrity. People always have questions about photography or photographing weddings. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how many people share that they do photography too and did one wedding and realized it definitely was not for them. That always kind of makes me chuckle inside. Last year I was photographing a wedding and the couple put out a card for me with an actual table assignment. That doesn't happen often, but I appreciate the gesture. When it was mealtime, I went over to the table, smiling as I do, and introduced myself. Before anyone at the table could say anything, one guest looked at me and said, "Oh no, you're going to have to find someplace else to sit." Mind you, the couple was nice enough to seat the DJ and I at this table, but this particular guest wasn't having it. I'm not exactly sure what her problem was, but based on her reaction, I'm guessing she felt she was too good to break bread with us working class folk. This was not a fancy venue. It was rustic and welcoming, but not one you would think of if you're thinking of an expensive or snobby environment. Some people just carry that around with them, I guess. I told the DJ what happened, and he said, "Let's see if she says it to me too." She did. So we told the server we were going to sit someplace else, and she looked confused, so we filled her in, and she rolled her eyes and said, "Okay." When she brought our meals over, she said she had just served that table and told us that, yeah, that woman was kind of a jerk, only she used a much stronger term. But I have had some great experiences and great meals at weddings, including some of the higher end ones, so they don't all play let's hide the vendors. One local venue that always seats us right outside the main room in really comfortable chairs brought us the same appetizers they were serving the guests, which isn't as common. Because where we were sitting was on the way back to the kitchen, when the servers would walk through and still had past apps on their trays, they would offer them to us because otherwise they would just have to throw them away. We had all kinds of fancy seafood apps that day, and this was before the giant steaks they brought us. I had to say it was a good day. My most luxurious meal story was at a venue in Rhode Island that overlooked the ocean. The DJ, his assistant, and we got everything the guests got, including a big prime rib and giant lobster tails. It was a meal for the ages. And because the DJ was sitting with us at the vendor table, we knew nothing was going to happen without our knowing it first. I also happened to be friends with this DJ, so despite us all traveling from Massachusetts to Rhode Island, we still had a local team, and a good one, to back each other up. I'm fortunate not to have any dietary restrictions. Typically, I'll eat it if it doesn't try to eat me first. Most couples offer their guests a vegetarian option in addition to the traditional beef and chicken meals. Even if they don't, I would expect a vegetarian meal isn't a super uncommon request where a chef wouldn't be able to pull a recipe out of their back pocket. I would always request a vegetarian meal for a second or assistant who needed one, and I was surprised at the number of plates that were just piles of potatoes accompanied by whatever vegetable was being served with the meat-based meals. To see the disappointment on my second's face when their meal was placed before them was unfortunate, but there was nothing to be done. Oh, the sadness of those vegetarian meals. I know photographers who have meal clauses written into their contracts. Sometimes they stipulate that they're served the same meal as any guest and that they're served concurrently with the couple. That's all well and good to ask the couple to sign that, but the venue isn't a signatory to that contract, so there's really nothing encouraging them to comply. The couple can pass that information along, but at the end of the day, the venue has their own policies and are going to do what they're going to do. Me, I don't mention it at all in my contract. I do bring up the meal in my final meeting with the couple, though. I'll nonchalantly ask, "So what's for dinner?" letting them know that they might need to let the venue or caterer know what my second and I are having. I'd say 99% of the time the couple already knows to get that information from me, so like all things, how you communicate can only help you out. When a venue gets it, they get it. Everyone that works at a wedding is supposed to be there for the same reason, which is to give the couple and their guests a good experience. Optimally, we're all working together for that goal. Far more often than not, my experiences are positive ones. These stories are far more the exception than the rule. Increasingly, over the years, we're fed a good meal close to the action at a time that benefits the couple. I try to be agreeable and easy to work with, so complaining to a venue about any of this isn't the hill I want to die on. When any of these things aren't what I would hope them to be, I make like Elsa and just let it go. Are the photos better when we get a full meal and are treated well? It's hard to say, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your taking the time to listen. If you like what you heard in this video, please like and subscribe. Do you have any stories of your own about vendor meals? Are there any experiences where you've been treated well or maybe not so much during this time of the wedding day? Feel free to share in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this and hear more stories, check out this other one I made for you. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth Kaye, and I'm here to help.